My name is Dmytrow, and I have the amazing opportunity to speak to you today on a topic so relevant to us today. It is probably what you're watching it on. It is about social media, phones, and devices. For those of you who may not know who we are Ebenezer Youth, and we are a youth ministry located in Saskatoon. And this month, we have been embarking on what we call Hot Topic January, this idea where we put everything on the table and talk about the prevailing issues of society today. And I'm here to speak with us on the topic of social media and phones and devices. And I'm actually quite excited to do so. But just to note, what we're also going to be doing for those of you who are a part of our Ebenezer Youth community, in a couple weeks from now, we are also going to be having something called Hot Topic Seminars, where we talk about all the different hot topic issues besides this one in seminar style formats where you can go to whatever session you want to go to in that. So before we begin, though, let me pray with a quick word to God. God, we thank you for this day, and I pray as I speak, you'd make me less so that you could become great, that you'd reveal yourself, that your Holy Spirit would come to whoever is watching this today, and that you'd be with them wherever they're at. So allow us to engage our minds, our hearts, that we might be able to know you better. So we pray this in your name. Amen. I want you to think right now. Do you think that your life could potentially be better if you did not have a device, whether it be a phone, an iPad, or your computer? Our phones, our devices, is a very interesting subject to speak upon because they are so prevalent in society today. And I want us today to accomplish two things. Number one, I want to give you today some important groundwork on what you need to understand about your device, or most importantly, your phone. That's likely the device you use the most. Number two, I also want to give you some practical tools on how to apply you being able to treat your phone, your device, like a tool. Phones are still a very new thing. It was only in 2007 that Steve Jobs changed the lives of so many with the iPhone. Now, most of us cannot even imagine life without it. My story with my phone is similar to many. It had a stronghold in my life. I could tell it gave me spiritual, mental, physical depletion in my life, and overall my well-being was worse off with the amount of time I would spend on my device. The Pew Research Center tells us that the average person in the age of Gen Z spends 7 hours and 22 minutes a day on their phone. To give you some perspective, that is 52.5 hours a week, 2,737 hours a year. And to make matters worse, these statistics are pre-COVID, and now it has gotten much worse. To make matters worse, if we look at a marketing research company in 2007, they realized that the average person saw 5,000 ads a day in North America. That was in 2007. 2023, the company came back and did this again. 10,000 ads a day was the national average for the human being. And if we look 40 years before this survey was done, the average was 500 ads a day. And a significant portion of these will appear on our devices. Actually, most of them do. Have we ever thought about the implications of what that means today? The amount of time we're spending on our devices, our phones specifically, the amount of time that we are spending seeing all these advertisements flood our minds, our thoughts, and our hearts. I think we often forget that our devices, social media, phones, don't work for us. They work for a multi-billion-dollar company, likely in California. Studies show that the more screen time spent means the more rapid increase in anxiety levels and depression levels. In a survey done in 2018 and for research for the film called The Social Dilemma, by the way, if you've not watched The Social Dilemma, it's on Netflix, totally worth a watch. You should definitely do that. But it was a survey that showed non-fatal self-harm spike in the past 10 years in 2018 has gone up by 189% comparatively to 2008. And the statistics were for girls aged 10 to 14. Non-fatal self-harm spikes went up 189% in 10 years for girls aged just 10 to 14. Isn't it strange that the iPhone was released in 2007, about 10 years before the survey was released? Now, we know that correlation does not equal causation, but it begs us to question, Is this the reason? Is this really healthy, maybe, is a better question, for us to spend these types of minutes on our devices? And it's obvious to me that it's not. But I think we begin to forget of the long-term implications this may have for our spiritual health as followers of Jesus today. I've become convinced that phones have begun to wreck our lives as they've begun to drift from their original purpose to enhance and to improve our life. The early research on the harm of phones is beginning to show, and it is an absolute nightmare. But what do we do with that? These statistics may startle you and make you even think of things a bit deeper, but that's not going to create life change for you. What does the Bible have to say? And I believe the Bible has much more to say about this than you may think, although the Bible was written 2,000 to about 5,000 years ago. We have to begin, though, in the garden, in Genesis chapter 1. We know that when God created the world, it was good. It was in something that we called before sin, which we'll get to in a second. We know that God created Adam and Eve, the first people who were made on earth. And what happened was because of sin, when Adam and Eve decided, if we go a little couple chapters forward, Adam and Eve had a choice to either eat the fruit from the tree of good, of knowledge and evil, or not. And Adam and Eve chose to sin, to disobey God. And we know sin entered into the world and brought utter chaos to our world. And one implication, there's many of them, but one implication is we lost satisfaction. That we humans are in what I call natural dissatisfaction in the modern age. We cannot sit without wanting to pick up our phone to distract us. Today, we cannot be alone with our phones. And here's the thing. Our phones offer us three powerful lies today, or maybe we can say three powerful fantasies. The first is this: with our phone, we can put our attention where we want. Number two, we can always be heard on our phones. Number three, we will never be alone with our phones. These three lies are not only false, but they're actually wrapped up as truth today, and they're extremely harmful. One of the most important passages to work off of in the context of phones is actually found in this beautiful letter Paul writes called the letter to the Philippians. So Paul's writing to this church in Philippi, and he says this in chapter 4, verse 11 to 13. Let's read together. Philippians 4, 11 to 13 says this: I don't say this out of need, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I find myself. I know how to make do with little, and I know how to make do with a lot. In any and in all circumstances, I have learned the secret of being content. Whether well-fed or hungry, whether in abundance or need, I am able to do all things through Christ who strengthens me. In context, what Paul is speaking about in this passage is how to become content. And a key word to note is that Paul actually had to learn what it meant to be content. And if you don't know what the word contentment means, contentment can mean a deep satisfaction not about where someone is or what someone isn't or what somebody will make out of a situation. Contentment is the choice. It is a choice to find a deep level of satisfaction that is kind of unchanging. So, this means that contentment is something that actually needs to be learned. And here's how I feel how satisfaction and contentment actually translates a lot with phones. You see, my guess is this of you. My guess is that you likely would not be able to put your phone down for a whole entire week without going crazy, or at least feeling a very large spike in anxiety levels. My guess is that you might not even be able to put it down for a day or an hour without feeling that way. We are addicted to our phones. That is a very common thing to note about society today. Our generation, the younger generation especially, Gen Z, we are addicted to our phones. And that's not a generalization. It is a reality for many of us. In other words, without our phones, we are dissatisfied. We are discontent. I don't imagine you want to be spending 7 hours and 22 minutes on your phone a day. No one wants that. But the Bible calls us to something greater than a phone addiction. And in 1 Timothy 6, verse 6 to 8, we read this: But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out. If we had food and clothing, we will be content with these. We have brought nothing here. We will bring nothing out. Paul states that the only things that we need is food and clothing. And where this is being shown, we're in Canada here. I would argue we probably need shelter here because it is wet and cold all the time in this country. But what the Apostle Paul is saying is that we actually don't need much. And honestly, I sometimes wonder not only if we'd be okay without our phones, but we would actually be better without them. What do we do with the social dilemma? What do we do with social media? What do we do with our phones or just any of our devices in general? And there's two radical options that appear when we kind of talk about these kind of things. Number one, do something radical, get rid of your phone, get rid of your devices, like go absolutely just nothing. Or you just ignore it and don't do anything about your situation. But I want to propose a third way. And I want to propose that we need to find a line in the middle of the road. And in Andy Crouch, in his book called The Tech-Wise Family, a brilliant read, by the way, if you haven't read it, he proposes this in his book. And I wouldn't use the exact words, but he says, almost Amish. And the idea is this, that technology does not really stay in its place, and it's designed to push your boundaries and take over your lives. Crouch states this, if we do not learn to put technology in all of its forms in its proper place, we will miss out on many of the best parts of life. We do not per se need to ditch our phones, but we need to learn how to treat them like tools. We need to become what Crouch says, almost Amish. The idea that we need to put boundaries around our phones so that we are the person in control of them. We're the ones who are treating them like tools, not the ones who is treating us like a tool. And if you do not have a phone yet, I encourage you to take some notes on this. Technology and phones, the reality is this. They are good at serving human beings. But the other reality is this. Human beings are not good at being served by phones. You need to remember that. See, the problem with phones, social media, devices, is that it provides a short-term solution that creates a longer-term problem. And that is not helpful by any means. And my question to us today is this. Is our overuse of phones creating just this black hole and vortex of entertainment, distraction, discontentment, and overall a larger picture we're thinking, is this part of causing the mental health crisis we're experiencing? Is this part of causing the anxiety and depression levels of spiking we're seeing? I think that phones, social media, and devices have a part to play in this, and the statistics would agree. We are at a place where if we are always on these phones, our devices, and social media, we might miss out on the beauty of our created world. And I sense that our phones may be shaping us often instead of making our lives more simple, which is what treating a phone like a tool could do. We need to learn what it looks like to draw a healthy working relationship to become the owners of our phones, not the ones being owned by our phones. I have 5 ideas that you can go home with today. So if you have a phone, or if you're watching on a phone, I encourage you to take notes. If you're watching on another device, I encourage you to actually bring out your phone and look at as I go here. The idea here is this. We need to turn our smartphone into a dumb phone. And our phones, again, are meant to be tools, nothing more. And that is why we need to reclaim this by putting our phones in its rightful place. So here's 5 ways. The first is this, turning grayscale on our phone settings. The color on our phones is meant to be addictive, and it makes us stay on our phones much longer. By using grayscale, it will make us use our phones less often. For the phone user, for iPhone, you can just go search up grayscale in your phone settings. I know you can do the same for Android, and it is super helpful. Number 2, put a social media time limit on all your social media apps. I used to have 45 minutes a day for every single social media app on my phone, and I find that it is more than enough time. And I'm going to show you what I now do in a bit. Number 3, put a screen time widget on the front of our phone. This is accountability for how you've been on your phone minute by minute. It is super helpful. Number 4, delete the apps that you don't need. Cleaning up the apps on your phone and not just getting rid of the ones that you haven't used in a few months or a year or whatever it is, actually just reduces clutter on your phone. And clutter is just never helpful for anyone in life. Number 5, if you are brave, delete all of your social media apps on your phone. This is the most bold, this is the most courageous, and I now can say I've successfully done this. It has been extremely freeing. The only thing is I do feel like a dinosaur when I'm on like TikTok or Instagram on my iPad or computer. But here's the thing. Taking the social media apps off of our phone is super helpful because the reality is what goes with you everywhere is your phone. It's in your right pocket all the time. So that means that everyone has 24/7 access to you on a social media app. No one should have that much access to you except the people who are truly close to you and that you love. But if we take social media off of our phones and we put it in its rightful place, then what happens is if you have just your social media apps on your iPad and it stays at home, or you just take it to you in limited places, which is the reality, you can't take it with you everywhere, then you have limits that are already built into your life, and that is super beneficial. So what I want to do though is just this. I would love for you to apply small, little, sustainable habits that will eventually create long-term change. And I've been able to apply these things and they have been a game changer in my life. And don't get me wrong, there are more things going on that we can also do to create limits. But here are 5 things I think that could be helpful for you to start at. Like I said though at the beginning, my story with my phone is similar to many. It had control of my life. I used it for 5+ hours a day. It was not good for my spiritual, my mental, or my overall well-being. The first step, though, is to learn to understand. Our phones, our devices, social media is shaping us in a very dangerous way that I don't think we fully comprehend yet. So the first step is that you have learned, and I hope that you've gotten something away today. Second is you need to seek to learn to apply habits in your life that will help your phone stay as a device. And through the work of the Holy Spirit, ultimately, we will be able to work off dependency to an addiction to our social media phones and come to Jesus. The gospel found in Jesus is freedom, freedom for all and anything. And that includes an addiction to a phone. And the reality is Jesus is the one who gives us life and life to the full, not our social media and our phones. So let me say that Jesus can free you, Jesus can give you hope, and he is there for you in this process. But I do want to say, let me call you back to this. Really think, what is your phone doing to you? What is your phone doing to you? And what can you do to fight back? Ebenezer Youth, it has been a pleasure with you today, and I cannot wait to see what you are doing to make changes on your phones. Peace out.